I need to write this down while I still remember what it feels like to be afraid. While I still remember what it feels like to be fully human. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 29 years old, and for 6 weeks I worked the night shift at the Route 77 pit stop, 53 miles outside of Tucson, Arizona. The job posting said they needed a mechanic who could work nights, $45 an hour, lodging included. No experience necessary, but automotive knowledge preferred. I had plenty of experience. 8 years turning wrenches at my ex-husband's shop before the divorce. What I didn't have was money, prospects, or many options left. My Honda Civic had died spectacularly on Route 77 in the middle of July, transmission giving out with a sound like grinding bones. I'd been driving west with everything I owned in the back seat, running from a life that had fallen apart in increments. $12,000 in credit card debt, an eviction notice from my Phoenix apartment, and my ex, Marcus, who'd kept the shop, the house, and our dog in the divorce, texting me that I still owed him for half the wedding ring he'd bought with money I'd earned. The temperature gauge in my dead Honda read 114 degrees when I saw the sign. Route 77, pit stop, 2 miles, last gas for 80 miles. I'd coasted into the parking lot on fumes and prayer, gravel crunching under my tires, heat shimmer making the horizon waver like something out of a fever dream. That's when I met Earl. He'd emerged from the garage bay like something conjured by the desert itself, tall and weathered, skin like old leather, somewhere between 60 and eternal. His eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost colorless, and when he looked at my car and then at me, I had the strangest sensation that he'd been expecting me. "Transmission?" he asked, his voice like sand shifting. "How did you—" Heard it coming a mile off. He'd wiped his hands on a rag that might have been red once before the desert had bleached it to pink. "You're out of luck and out of money, I'd wager." I didn't ask how he knew that either. The pit stop itself looked like it had been there since the highway was just a dirt road. A low cinder block building painted the color of old bones, 2 rows of gas pumps that were probably antique, and a 3-bay garage with doors that looked like they'd been replaced a dozen times. Behind it, a small trailer sat in the shade of the only tree for miles, a scrubby mesquite that had no business surviving in this heat. "I need a mechanic for nights," Earl had said, studying me with those pale eyes. "Someone who knows their way around an engine, someone who can follow instructions exactly." His emphasis on that last word should have warned me. "Pays $45 an hour, midnight to 8 a.m. You can stay in the trailer, free, work for 2 weeks, and I'll fix your transmission myself." I should have asked why the pay was so high for pumping gas and changing oil. Should have wondered why he needed someone specifically for the night shift. Should have questioned the intensity in his gaze when he said, "Follow instructions exactly." But I was broke, stranded, and desperate, the holy trinity of bad decisions. "When do I start?" I'd asked. Earl's expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in those pale eyes. Relief, resignation. "Tonight," he'd said. "But first, we need to go over the rules." The office was cooler than it had any right to be, given the ancient air conditioning unit rattling in the window. Earl had gestured to a folding chair across from a metal desk that looked like military surplus. The walls were covered with calendars from different years: 1987, 1993, 2001, 2015, all turned to different months, like someone was tracking something across decades. He'd pulled a laminated sheet from the desk drawer. The paper was yellowed, the lamination cracked and peeling at the corners. The rules were typed in what looked like an old typewriter font, some lines darker than others, as if the list had been revised, retyped, and relaminated many times. "Read these," Earl had said, sliding the sheet across to me. "Read them carefully. Read them twice, then read them again." I picked up the sheet. My hands left sweat prints on the old lamination. Route 77, pit stop, night shift regulations. Rule 1, never turn on all the lights in the garage after 10 p.m. Keep at least one bay in darkness at all times. The dark bay should rotate. Bay 1 one night, Bay 2 the next, Bay 3 the third night, then repeat. Rule 2. At exactly 11:47 p.m., check the air pressure in Bay 3, whether or not a vehicle is present. The pressure gauge should read between 35 to 38 psi. If it reads anything else, adjust it immediately and do not look at the corners of the bay while doing so. Rule 3. If someone asks for directions to Copper Springs, provide directions using only left turns, regardless of the actual route. Do not question why. Do not explain that it will take them in circles. Rule 4. The ice machine in the convenience store hums at F sharp. If the pitch changes to any other note, unplug it immediately and leave the store for a minimum of 15 minutes. Do not look through the windows while outside. Rule 5. Never make eye contact with anyone pumping gas at islands 1 or 6 after midnight. Help them if they ask. Speak to them if they speak first, but keep your gaze on their vehicle, their hands, or the middle distance, not their eyes. Never their eyes. Rule 6. If you find a 1965 penny on the property, place it in the Maxwell house, coffee can beneath the register. Do not spend it. Do not keep it. Do not throw it away. Rule 7. The bathroom key is attached to a large wooden paddle that says restroom. This key must never leave the building. If a customer insists on taking it outside, refuse service and offer them free gas to leave immediately. Rule 8. At precisely 2:22 a.m., turn off the illuminated open sign for exactly 3 minutes. Set a timer. Do not turn it back on early. Do not leave it off past 3 minutes. Rule 9. If a customer attempts to pay with a silver dollar minted before 1900, refuse it politely. Offer them free gas up to 10 gallons and suggest they leave before dawn. Do not ask questions. Do not accept the coin under any circumstances. Rule 10. Never service a vehicle that is covered in desert dust but has completely clean tires. Tell the driver you are short-staffed and cannot help them. Offer them the phone to call a tow truck. Stay in the office until they leave. Rule 11. The radio in the office can only be tuned to AM stations after sunset. FM frequencies may pick up broadcasts that are not meant for human ears. If you hear music with no commercials or a voice speaking in a language that sounds almost but not quite like English, turn it off immediately. Rule 12. If you see footprints leading from the property into the desert, do not follow them. Not even if they look fresh. Not even if they look like they were made by someone who needs help. Especially not then. Rule 13. The storage room at the back of the garage must be locked at sunset. If you hear knocking from inside during the night, do not respond. Do not open the door. Do not speak. The knocking will stop before dawn. It always does. Rule 14. Cats occasionally appear on the property at night. They are to be fed with the wet food in the office mini-fridge, but never touched. Do not attempt to pet them. Do not attempt to confine them. They are working. Rule 15. If a customer knows your full name, first, middle, and last, without you having told them, close bay door 2 immediately, regardless of whether there is a vehicle inside. Go to the office and lock the door. Stay there until the customer leaves. Do not watch them go. I'd read through the list 3 times, as instructed, each reading making my stomach tighten a little more. This is a joke, right? I'd finally said, looking up at Earl. Some kind of hazing thing for the new employee? Earl's expression hadn't changed. You think I'd laminate a joke? These are insane. Checking air pressure at 11:47 exactly. Not looking at people pumping gas. This is... The rules that keep you alive, Earl interrupted, his voice flat and certain. The rules that keep this place running. The rules that have kept me breathing for 37 years. He'd leaned forward, and in the fluorescent light, I could see he had scars on his forearms. Old burns, crescent-shaped. You follow these rules exactly, Sarah, and you'll be fine. You'll make good money. I'll fix your car. And in a month you can drive out of here with enough cash to start over somewhere else. And if I don't follow them? Then you'll find out why the pay is $45 an hour for pumping gas. He'd stood, the chair scraping against linoleum. I work the day shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. You work midnight to 8 a.m. We overlap at the beginning and end of your shift. You'll be alone here from 6 p.m. to midnight, and from 8 a.m. to noon, technically. But the weird stuff only happens on your watch. The night watch. Define weird stuff. Can't. Wouldn't believe me if I told you. You need to see it yourself. He'd walked to the door, then paused. First night is always quiet. They're watching, getting a feel for you. Second night is when they start testing. By the third night, you'll either believe or you'll quit, or he'd stopped. Or what? Or you'll be the reason we need to revise the rules again. Earl had pulled out a key ring with dozens of keys. He'd removed one, the trailer key, and held it out. Get settled. Sleep if you can. Your shift starts at midnight. I'll be here to walk you through the first few hours. I'd taken the key. It was warm, like it had been in someone's pocket for a long time. "Oh," I'd said as he opened the door, letting in a wall of heat. "Why do you stay? If it's so dangerous, if these rules are real, why not just leave?" He'd looked back at me, and for the first time, I'd seen something in his pale eyes that looked like sadness. Because somebody has to. Because the desert needs a doorman. And because he'd glanced at one of the calendars on the wall, the one from 1987. Because I made a promise to the person who had this job before me. Then he'd left, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving me alone in an office covered with calendars from years that weren't quite random, holding a list of rules that couldn't possibly be serious. I'd looked down at the laminated sheet again. In the bottom right corner, partially obscured by a crack in the lamination, I noticed something I'd missed before. Handwritten words in faded ink. For Tommy. For Maria. For all of them. Follow the rules. JCJC. My middle name is Jane. My mother's maiden name was Chen. My full name is Sarah Jane Chen. And my grandfather's name was James Chen. I'd felt the air conditioning kick on, but the chill that ran through me had nothing to do with the temperature. Night 1. The trailer had been sparse but clean. A bed, a kitchenette, a tiny bathroom with a shower that sputtered rust-colored water for the first 30 seconds. I'd tried to sleep through the afternoon, but the heat made it impossible. I'd lain there sweating, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself the rules were just Earl's eccentricity, some elaborate prank he played on new employees. But I kept thinking about those initials. JC. My grandfather had died when I was 7. I remembered him as a tall man with calloused hands who always smelled like motor oil and desert sage. My mother never talked about him much, and I'd never thought to ask. He'd lived somewhere in Arizona, worked as a mechanic. I'd gone to his funeral, a small affair, barely anyone there. Had he worked here? At 11:30 p.m., I'd given up on sleep and walked across the gravel lot to the main building. The sun had set hours ago, and the desert night had that particular quality of darkness you only get far from cities. Absolute, profound, broken only by the lights of the pit stop itself. The fluorescent glow from the convenience store windows looked like the only illumination in the entire world. Earl was waiting in the office, drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's okayest grandpa." "You read the rules again?" he asked. "Memorized them." "Good." He'd set down the mug. "I'll stay until 2 a.m. tonight. Walk you through the first rotation. After that, you're on your own until 8 a.m. when I come back." "Has anyone ever broken the rules?" "Yes." "What happened?" Earl had stood, pulling on a jacket despite the fact that it was still probably 90 degrees outside. "What do you think happened, Sarah?" He'd led me through the building, showing me where everything was, though there wasn't much. The convenience store was like every other desert gas station I'd seen. Chips, jerky, energy drinks, a sad rotating case of hot dogs that looked like they'd been there since the Clinton administration. The coffee station, the restrooms, the ice machine, which was indeed humming at a perfect F-sharp. "You have perfect pitch?" I'd asked. "You learn to recognize it after a while." When it changes, you'll know. Feels wrong in your bones. The garage was standard. 3 bays, fluorescent lights, tool chests, a hydraulic lift in bay 2, an air compressor that looked older than me. Earl had pointed to the light switches. Bay 1 stays dark tonight. Tomorrow night, bay 2. Night after, bay 3. You keep a rotation log. He'd shown me a clipboard with dates going back months, a pattern of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Why? Because they need somewhere to gather. Somewhere out of the light. You give them 1 bay, they don't try to claim all 3. He'd said it like it made perfect sense. At midnight exactly, Earl had clocked me in on a literal time clock, the kind with paper cards you stamp. Mine was fresh, my name written at the top in Earl's neat handwriting. Sarah Chen. It's official now, he'd said. Your night shift. The first hour had been boring. No customers. I'd sat in the office, listening to an AM station playing old country music. Patsy Cline, Hank Williams, Johnny Cash. Earl had done paperwork, or pretended to. Mostly, I think he was watching me. At 11:47, he'd nodded toward the garage. Bay 3, air pressure check. I'd walked into the garage, Earl following. Bays 1 and 2 were lit by harsh fluorescence. Bay 1 was dark, and something about that darkness seemed thicker than it should be, like it was actively repelling the light from the other bays. Bay 3 was empty, just concrete floor and the air pressure gauge mounted on the wall, its coiled yellow hose hanging like a sleeping snake. I'd picked it up, pressed the trigger. 35, PSI. Good, Earl had said from behind me. Normal, log it. I'd logged it in a notebook. 11:47 p.m. Bay 3, 35 PSI, normal. What happens if it's not between 35 and 38? I'd asked. You adjust it. And if I look at the corners while I'm doing it? Earl had been quiet for a moment. You might see what's gathered there. And if you see them, they know you can see them. And then they'll want to interact. The way he said interact made it sound like the worst possible outcome. What's in the corners, Earl? The ones who are waiting, the ones who haven't accepted it yet. He'd walked back toward the office. Come on, next check is at 2:22. At 1:30 a.m., our first customer had arrived. A semi-truck pulling into the diesel lanes. The driver had been normal, tired, human. He'd paid in cash, used the bathroom, bought 3 Red Bulls and a bag of Funyuns. Earl had handled it while I watched from the office window. When the truck had pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the darkness, Earl had poured himself more coffee. See? Normal customer. You'll get a few of those every night. Most of the traffic is normal. Most? Maybe 70%. And the other 30%? That's what the rules are for. At 2:20 a.m., Earl had handed me a kitchen timer. Set it for 3 minutes. At exactly 2:22, kill the open sign. Start the timer. Do not turn it back on until the timer goes off. Do not look outside while it's off. Why? Because the things that hunt at night navigate by light. We go dark for 3 minutes every night. It's part of the agreement. We give them free passage. They leave the building alone. My hands had been shaking slightly as I'd set the timer. I'd watched the office clock, the kind with actual hands, no digital display. At 2:22 exactly, I'd flipped the switch for the open sign. The red neon had died with the electric hum. I'd started the timer. And the quality of the darkness outside had changed immediately. It's hard to explain. The desert night had been dark before, yes, but normal dark. The kind you get from absence of light. But the moment that sign went off, the darkness outside the windows became something else, thicker, more present, like it was pressing against the glass. Don't look, Earl had said quietly. But I'd looked. I'd looked because I'm human, and when someone tells you not to look, you look. Outside, in the darkness beyond the window, things were moving. Not walking, moving, flowing. Shapes that weren't quite shapes, darkness within darkness, and the awful sense that some of them were turning toward the building, toward the windows, toward me. The timer had been ticking. 2 minutes 30 seconds, 2 minutes 45. One of the shapes had come closer to the window. I'd been able to see it more clearly now. Tall, impossibly tall, with proportions that were almost human but wrong. Its head had been tilted at an angle that would have broken a person's neck. It had raised something that might have been a hand. Sarah, Earl's voice had been sharp. Stop looking. I'd torn my gaze away, heart hammering, and stared at the timer instead. 1 minute, 45 seconds. From outside, I'd heard something. Not quite a sound, more like the memory of a sound, like wind, through empty buildings or voices calling from very far away. 30 seconds. The temperature in the office had dropped. I could see my breath. 15 seconds. The thing outside had been tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. The timer rang. I'd hit the open sign switch. The red neon had flickered on, and the darkness had retreated like something living, pulling back into the desert. The temperature had normalized. The tapping had stopped. Earl had been gripping his coffee mug so hard his knuckles were white. They're more active tonight than usual, he'd said, his voice carefully neutral. That's interesting. What the fuck was that? The things that traveled the empty spaces, the things that got lost out there and never found their way back. He'd set down his mug. We're on their route. This place is a marker for them, a waypoint. We turn off the light, they pass through. Everyone's happy. I am not happy, Earl. But you're alive. He'd pulled on his jacket. I'm going to head out. You'll be fine until morning. Most of the weird stuff happens in the first few hours after midnight. After 3 a.m., it usually quiets down. You might get 1 or 2 more customers before dawn. Regular ones, probably. Maybe one that isn't. How will I know the difference? You'll know. He'd headed for the door, then stopped. You did good tonight, Sarah. You followed the rules. Keep doing that. Oh, wait. My grandfather, James Chen, did he? Get some rest when you can. There's a cot in the back room. He'd left before I could finish the question, and then I'd been alone. The Route 77 pit stop, surrounded by miles of empty desert in the dead hours of night, with a list of rules that had just proven themselves to be absolutely, terrifyingly real. I'd sat in the office, listening to the radio play songs from the 1950s, and tried to stop shaking. At 3:47 a.m., I checked Bay 3 again, even though it wasn't 11:47. The air pressure had been 36 psi. I hadn't looked at the corners, but I'd felt something in them. A presence, like someone standing just out of sight. At 4:15 a.m., a pickup truck had pulled in. Normal guy, needed gas and directions. I'd helped him, and he'd left, human, real. At 5:30 a.m., another vehicle had arrived, a station wagon, wood paneling on the sides, the kind they stopped making in the 80s. It had pulled up to Island 6. Island 6. After midnight, don't make eye contact. I'd grabbed the clipboard and walked out, keeping my gaze on the vehicle. It was covered in dust, but I couldn't tell about the tires in the darkness. A family had been inside. Mother, father, 2 kids in the back. The father had rolled down the window. "Fill it up, please," he'd said. His voice had sounded normal. Midwestern accent. Tired. Sure thing. I'd kept my eyes on the gas cap as I'd unscrewed it, on the pump as I'd started it, on the numbers as they'd climbed. Not on the family, not on their faces. Long night? The father had asked. Long enough. We've been driving for a while, looking for Copper Springs. You know it. My hand had frozen on the pump trigger. Copper Springs, only left turns. Sure, I'd said, forcing my voice to stay steady. When you leave here, take a left onto 77. Go about 5 miles, you'll see a dirt road. Take a left. Follow that for a while, you'll hit another intersection. Take a left. The directions made no sense. They'd take him in a massive circle, probably get him more lost. That seems, the father had started. That's the way, I'd interrupted. Trust me. The pump had clicked off. $42. Come on inside and pay when you're ready, I'd said, still not looking at them. I'd walked back to the office, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to look at them properly. I hadn't. Through the window, I'd watched the father get out. In the fluorescent light, I'd been able to see him more clearly now. His clothes were wrong, too formal, like something from the 1960s. And as he'd walked toward the building, I'd noticed his shoes. They had made no sound on the gravel. He'd come inside, pulled out a wallet and handed me cash. Old bills. I'd made change, still keeping my gaze away from his face, focusing on his hands. They'd been clean, but there had been something wrong about them. The proportions were slightly off, like a photograph that had been stretched. Thanks for the directions, he'd said. We've been trying to get to Copper Springs for a long time. Safe travels, I'd managed. He'd left. The station wagon had started with a sound like thunder, and they'd pulled out onto Route 77, heading north. I'd watched them take the left I'd described, their taillights disappearing into the darkness. I'd realized I was crying and didn't know why. At 6 a.m., Earl had returned, looking like he'd actually slept. He'd found me in the office, still shaking slightly. You made it, he'd said, something like relief in his voice. The family, the station wagon. Were they dead? Yeah, probably since the 60s, judging by the description. They come through every few weeks, still looking for Copper Springs. He'd poured coffee. There is no Copper Springs, not anymore. Ghost town, gone since the 50s, but they don't know that. So we give them directions that keep them moving, keep them searching. Because if they stop searching, what? They might realize they're dead, and then they might get angry. And angry ghosts are dangerous ghosts. Earl had sipped his coffee. You did good. You followed the rules. You're still here. Is it always like this? Tonight was mild. You got the wanderers, the passers through. The easy ones. He'd set down his mug. It gets worse, but you'll be ready. You've got the instinct for it. I can tell. What instinct? Your grandfather's instinct. Earl had smiled the first time I'd seen him do so. It hadn't been a comforting expression. This job is in your blood, Sarah Chen. Whether you knew it or not, I'd wanted to ask more, but exhaustion had hit me like a wave. Earl had sent me to the trailer, and I'd collapsed onto the bed, still wearing my shoes. I dreamed of my grandfather, standing in the darkness of Bay 1, checking a pressure gauge while things gathered in the corners. In the dream, he turned to me and said, "Follow the rules, Sarah. It's the only way to keep them in balance." When I'd woken up at 2 p.m., drenched in sweat, the temperature outside was 116 degrees, and I'd had 5 more hours until my next shift. Night 2, I'd spent the afternoon doing something I should have done before accepting the job, researching. The trailer had no Wi-Fi, but I'd driven into town. Earl had loaned me his truck, my Civic still waiting for its promised transmission repair, and found a library with internet access. James Chen, mechanic, Arizona, Route 77. The search results had been sparse. An obituary from 2001. James Chen, 67, longtime resident of Route 77 corridor, passed peacefully. Survived by daughter Margaret Chen Williams and granddaughter Sarah. Memorial service private. Longtime resident of Route 77 corridor. Not Tucson, not Phoenix, the corridor. Like he'd lived on the road itself. I dug deeper, going through newspaper archives, found a small article from 1997. Local mechanic saves stranded travelers. It had been about my grandfather pulling a family out of a flash flood, towing their car to safety at his garage. The Route 77 pit stop. There was a photo. My grandfather standing in front of the same building I was working in now, 26 years ago. And standing next to him, younger but unmistakable, was Earl. The article said Earl was the owner, but that would make him at least 60 in 1997, which would make him close to 90 now. The man I'd met didn't look a day over 65. I'd printed the article, driven back to the pit stop. and found Earl in the garage, working on someone's Ford F-150. You knew him, I'd said, holding up the printout. You worked with him. Earl had set down his wrench carefully. I did. How old are you, Earl? Old enough to know better, young enough to keep making the same mistakes. He'd wiped his hands. Your grandfather worked here for 32 years, Sarah. From 1969 to 2001. He was the best night shift operator we ever had. Followed the rules perfectly. Never lost his nerve. Never let the fear make him sloppy. Why didn't my mother tell me? Because he asked her not to. Because this job, it changes you. He didn't want you to come looking for it. Didn't want you to feel obligated. Earl had looked at me with those pale eyes. But here you are anyway. Broken car, out of money, out of options. Same as him, same as me, same as everyone who ends up on night shift. You're saying this was inevitable. I'm saying the desert has a way of calling its own. He'd returned to his work on the F-150. Your shift starts in 4 hours. Get some rest. Tonight will be harder. He'd been right. At midnight, I'd clocked in, and Earl had handed me a small bag of wet cat food. Might need this tonight, he'd said. There's a calico that shows up sometimes. She'll want to be fed around 1 a.m. Don't try to pet her. Rule 14. The cats are working. What does that mean? Means they can see things we can't. Go places we shouldn't. They keep certain entities away from the building. Think of them as spiritual pest control. Earl had grabbed his jacket. I'm heading out earlier tonight. You'll be on your own from midnight on. You've got my cell number if there's an emergency, but signal's spotty out here. What qualifies as an emergency? If something's actively trying to kill you, that's an emergency. If something's just trying to scare you, that's Tuesday. He'd paused at the door. Oh, and Sarah. Tonight's Bay 2's turned to be dark. Don't forget. He'd left, and the desert night had swallowed the sound of his truck immediately. I'd started my routine. Turned off the lights in Bay 2, checked the air pressure in Bay 3. 37 psi, normal, and settled into the office with the AM radio playing Buddy Holly. The first customer had arrived at 12:47 a.m., a Mercedes sedan, new, expensive. It had pulled up to Island 3 and a woman had gotten out. She'd been wearing a business suit despite the heat, her hair in a perfect bun. She'd looked normal, real, human, until she'd spoken. I need directions to Copper Springs, she'd said, her voice flat, emotionless. Copper Springs, only left turns. But something had felt different about this one. She'd been looking right at me, her eyes sharp and aware in a way the ghost families hadn't been. This wasn't a wandering spirit caught in a loop. This was a test. Take a left out of here, I'd said, keeping my voice steady. 5 miles down, take another left. Keep following the lefts until you get there. That's not the correct route, she'd said. It's the route I'm giving you. She'd smiled, and her teeth had been too white, too many. You're learning. Good. The rules exist for a reason, Sarah Chan. She'd known my name, my full name. Rule 15. Close bay door 2, go to the office, lock the door. But bay 2's door was already closed. It was the dark bay tonight, and she hadn't said my middle name, just first and last. Fill up your tank, I'd asked, unsure if I was still in safe territory. No need, I don't require fuel. She'd gotten back in her Mercedes. I'll see you again, Sarah, when you're ready for the next test. The Mercedes had driven away, but I'd noticed something as it left. The engine made no sound, none at all. The car had glided out of the lot like a ghost, its taillights too bright, too red. I'd gone back inside, hands shaking, and logged the encounter in a notebook I'd started keeping. 12:47 a.m., woman asking for Copper Springs directions, knew my name, first and last only. Called it a test, no engine sound. At 1:14 a.m., I'd heard a meowing from outside. The calico Earl had mentioned sat near the door, looking at me through the glass. She was small, scraggly, with matted fur and eyes that reflected the fluorescent light like mirrors. I'd grabbed the wet food, opened the door carefully, and set the food down outside. The cat had approached, sniffed the food, then looked up at me. "You're welcome," I'd said. The cat had meowed once, a sound that seemed too deep for its small body, and began eating. I'd noticed that around the cat, the air seemed clearer somehow. The oppressive weight of the desert night had lifted slightly, like she was creating a small bubble of safety. I'd started to reach down to pet her. "Don't touch them." I'd pulled my hand back. The cat had finished eating, licked her chops, and then done something that made my blood run cold. She turned her head completely around, owl-like, to look at the desert behind her. Then she'd hissed at something I couldn't see and bolted into the darkness. The oppressive weight had returned immediately. Whatever she'd been warning away was back. At 2:22 a.m., I turned off the open sign and set the timer, remembering not to look outside. But I'd heard them this time, voices calling my name from the darkness, not Sarah, my full name. Sarah Jane Chen. Sarah Jane Chen. Sarah Jane Chen, we've been waiting for you. The timer couldn't tick fast enough. When the 3 minutes were up and I'd flipped the sign back on, the voices are cut off mid-word, leaving only silence. At 3:33 a.m., I'd been nodding off in the office when I'd heard it. The ice machine's pitch had changed. No longer F-sharp. Now it was humming at a lower tone, something discordant and wrong that made my teeth ache. Rule 4. Unplug it immediately. Leave the store for 15 minutes. Don't look through the windows. I'd walked into the convenience store, trying to ignore the way the fluorescent lights were flickering in a pattern that seemed almost rhythmic. The ice machine sat in the corner, humming its wrong note, and I could see frost forming on the outside of it, which made no sense given the ambient temperature. I'd reached behind it and pulled the plug. The humming had stopped, and something inside the machine had moved. I'd run outside, set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes, and stood in the parking lot, deliberately facing away from the building. The desert stretched out before me, vast and empty under a sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. I'd made it 11 minutes before I'd heard the sound from inside the convenience store. A crash, like metal hitting tile, followed by a wet sliding sound. Don't look through the windows. I'd stared at the desert, counting seconds, while behind me I'd heard the thing moving through the convenience store. Slow, methodical, searching. 14 minutes. The sliding sound had gotten closer to the windows. I'd seen the shadow of something impossibly tall fall across the pavement in front of me, cast by the fluorescent lights from inside. 15 minutes. I turned around. The windows had been fogged from the inside, completely opaque with condensation. I'd walked back in, bracing myself. The store had been freezing. I could see my breath in great clouds. The ice machine was still unplugged, and its door hung open. Inside, the ice bin was empty except for a puddle of water and something else, dark streaks that looked disturbingly like tar. The wet sliding marks led from the ice machine to the storage room at the back of the garage. The storage room that must be locked at sunset. I checked the door. Still locked, but the wet marks led right up to it, then stopped, as if whatever made them had passed through the solid door. I'd plugged the ice machine back in. It had started humming at F-sharp again, perfectly normal. At 4:44 a.m., I'd been back in the office, still shivering from the cold of the convenience store, when I'd noticed something on the desk that hadn't been there before. A photograph, old and faded, in a cracked frame. It showed 3 people standing in front of the pit stop. My grandfather on the left, much younger, maybe in his 40s. Earl in the middle, looking exactly the same age he did now. And on the right, a woman I didn't recognize. Hispanic, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a tired smile. Written on the back in faded ink. James, Earl, and Maria. Night shift crew, 1987. We keep the balance. Maria, the name from the note on the rules. For Tommy, for Maria, for all of them. I turned the photo over again, studying the woman's face. She'd been looking slightly off camera, like she'd noticed something the photographer hadn't. A piece of paper had been tucked into the frame, folded, yellowed. I'd opened it carefully. It was a handwritten note in shaky cursive. "Oh, if you're reading this, I didn't make it through the blue moon. I'm sorry. I tried to follow the rules, but there were too many of them this time. Too many gathered. The dark bay wasn't enough. Tell James I'm sorry. Tell him to watch the corners more carefully. Tell him the count is increasing. Tommy's waiting for me. I can hear him calling. After 6 years, I'm finally going to see my boy again. Don't blame yourself. We all know the risks. The desert takes what it's owed. Maria, September 15th, 1987. I checked the calendar on the wall. The one from 1987. It was turned to September. September 15th was circled in red. I'd looked at the other calendars. Each one had a date circled. Different months, different years, but all on the 15th. 1987, September 15th, 1993, March 15th, 2001, June 15th, 2015, December 15th. A pattern, not the same month, but always the 15th. I pulled out my phone, checked the current date. July 29th. August 15th was 17 days away, and according to my astronomy app, August 15th would feature a blue moon, the second full moon in a calendar month. My hands had been shaking as I'd placed the photo back on the desk. Earl had left this here for me to find. He wanted me to know, but why? At 5:50 a.m., headlights had appeared on the highway. A vehicle moving fast, too fast for the desert road. It had pulled into the lot with a screech of brakes, gravel spraying. A pickup truck, modern, covered in dust. But when I'd looked at the tires, they had been completely clean. Spotless. Rule 10. Never service a vehicle covered in dust with clean tires. A man had gotten out, young, maybe 25, wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He'd looked panicked, real fear in his eyes. "Thank God," he'd gasped, running toward the office. "I've been driving for hours. My GPS is going crazy. I'm completely lost and my truck is making this horrible sound." I'd met him at the door, not opening it. "I'm sorry, we're short-staffed tonight. I can't help you. There's a phone inside you can use to call a tow truck. Please, I just need someone to look at it. It will take 5 minutes. I cannot help you. You can use the phone or you can leave." I'd kept my voice firm, fighting the instinct to help. He'd looked so scared, so human. "Please," he'd said again, and his voice had broken. "Please, I don't want to go back out there. There's something following me. Something in the desert. I've seen it in my mirrors, keeping pace. Please let me stay here until sunrise." My hand had been on the door handle, every human instinct screaming to let him in, to help. But his tires were too clean. "The phone is inside," I'd repeated. "You can come in and use the phone, but I cannot service your vehicle." He'd stared at me for a long moment, and something had shifted in his expression. The fear had drained away, replaced by something else. Something cold. "You're better than the last one," he'd said, his voice different now, older, more amused. She would have opened the door immediately, would have come out to look at my truck. He'd made air quotes. Would have followed me into Bay 3. "What are you?" "A test, an evaluation, a filter." He'd smiled, and his teeth had been normal, but his eyes had been wrong. The pupils too large, reflecting light like an animal's. "You passed, for now." He'd gotten back in the truck, and it had driven away. As it left, I'd noticed the license plate, TMP 1965, TMP, temporary, and 1965, the year of the pennies in Rule 6. At 6 a.m., Earl had arrived to find me sitting in the office, surrounded by notes and the old photograph. "You found Maria's letter," he'd said quietly. "What happened on September 15th, 1987? Earl had poured coffee, his movements slow and deliberate. "Blue moon. Happens every couple of years. 2 full moons in 1 calendar month. Something about the double moon, the extra pull on the tides, the way it affects the barrier between here and there." He'd sat down heavily. "Things get more active, more aggressive. The rules barely hold. We need more than one person to manage it. Maria died. Maria died because she tried to save someone who couldn't be saved. Broke Rule 15 to help what she thought was a customer who knew her name. Turned out to be something pretending. He'd sipped his coffee. Your grandfather never forgave himself. He was supposed to be here that night, but his daughter, your mother, was in the hospital. Appendicitis. He chose family. And the other dates? 1993, 2001, 2015? Other blue moons. Other people who didn't make it. Tommy was Maria's son. Died in 1981, blue moon in July. She stayed on after, hoping to see him again. And in September 87, she did. But it wasn't really him, just something wearing his shape. Earl had set down his mug. 2001 was your grandfather. June 15th, he knew it was coming. Put his affairs in order. Told me to make sure you never found out about this place. But you hired me, because 3 weeks ago, on the July blue moon, my partner didn't make it. Man named Robert Chen, your grandfather's younger brother, your great uncle. Earl had pulled out another photograph, a man who looked like an older version of my grandfather, standing in the same spot I'd been standing all night. Robert made it through 40 blue moons, 40. But last month, something new came through. Something we hadn't seen before. It knew things, knew the rules, knew how to bend them without breaking them. And the next blue moon is August 15th. 17 days, and I can't do it alone anymore, Sarah. I'm old, older than I should be. This place keeps me alive, but it's wearing me down. I need someone with the blood, someone connected to the line. Your grandfather, your great uncle. They were part of the original bargain, back when this place was established. Their bloodline keeps the balance. What original bargain? Earl had stood, walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like the world was burning. That's a conversation for another night. You've had enough for one shift. He turned back to me. You did good, Sarah. You followed the rules. You passed their tests. You're going to be ready. Ready for what? To take your grandfather's place, to keep the balance, to survive the blue moon. He'd smiled that uncomforting smile again. Welcome to the family business. I'd driven back to the trailer as the sun rose, exhausted and terrified and somehow exhilarated. I'd dreamed again of my grandfather, but this time he wasn't alone. He'd been standing with Maria and Tommy, with Robert, with people I didn't know. All of them wearing mechanics' uniforms, all of them watching me. You're one of us now, my grandfather had said. The desert has claimed you, just like it claimed us. When I'd woken, there'd been a 1965 penny on my nightstand. I'd placed it in my pocket, and later, I'd put it in the Maxwell House coffee can beneath the register. The can had been full of them. Hundreds of pennies, all from 1965, all payment from things that weren't quite human. Night 3, I'd spent the day researching the history of Route 77, trying to understand what Earl had meant by original bargain. The library had old maps, historical records, newspaper archives going back to the 1950s. Route 77 wasn't always Route 77. In the 1940s, it had been a dirt road used by miners traveling between Tucson and the copper mines up north. Before that, it had been a Native American trade route. And before that, according to a book on regional folklore, it had been considered a sacred path, a road between worlds. The book, written in 1962 by a folklorist named Dr. Sarah Whitmore, had an entire chapter on liminal spaces in the Sonoran Desert. She documented stories from local tribes about places where the boundary between the living world and the spirit world was thin, crossroads, certain caves, and a specific stretch of desert along what would later become Route 77. The Tohono O'odham speak of the Road of Shadows, where the dead travel on their journey to the next world. According to legend, certain individuals are chosen to serve as guides or gatekeepers, ensuring safe passage for spirits while protecting the living from those entities that refuse to move on. These gatekeepers inherit the role through bloodline, with the responsibility passing from one generation to the next. Bloodline. Family business. My grandfather, my great-uncle, now me. I'd photocopied the entire chapter, along with a map that showed the road of shadows running almost exactly where Route 77 was now. And where the road intersected with a dry riverbed, there was a symbol, a circle with 4 lines extending outward. The same symbol was painted on the storage room door at the pit stop. I'd noticed it yesterday, but thought it was just old graffiti. At 7 p.m., I'd returned to find Earl closing up the day shift. He'd looked tired, older than usual. "You okay?" I'd asked. "Just feeling my age, or ages." He'd attempted a smile. "Found something in your research?" I'd shown him the photocopies. He'd studied them carefully, nodding occasionally. Dr. Whitmore was a regular customer. Used to stop by once a month, always had questions. Smart woman. Too smart. She figured out too much. He'd handed the pages back. Disappeared in 1964. Went out into the desert one night with her notebooks and recording equipment. We found her car 3 days later. Empty. No body, no blood. Just her notebooks, and every page had been torn out except one. What did it say? "They showed me where the road goes. I'm following it. Don't come looking." Earl had locked the register. Some people aren't meant to be gatekeepers, Sarah. They're meant to cross over. She was one of them. And my grandfather. Was he meant to be a gatekeeper? Your grandfather was the best gatekeeper I ever worked with. He understood the balance, knew when to be merciful and when to be firm. The entities respected him, even the dangerous ones. Earl had pulled on his jacket. He made a deal back in 1969 to extend the protection of this way station, to strengthen the rules. It cost him 32 years of his life, and in this end, it cost him his life entirely. But because of his sacrifice, this place has been relatively safe. The rules work, most of the time. What changed? You said something new came through last month. Earl's expression had darkened. Something old, wearing something new. It calls itself the Traveler. Says it's been walking the road of shadows since before humans built the first fire. Says the bargain is ending, the rules are weakening, and soon this place will return to what it was before. A true crossing with no protections. No gatekeepers. Is it telling the truth? I don't know. That's what scares me. He'd headed for the door. Be extra careful tonight. The Traveler tends to show up every 3 or 4 days. Tonight's day 4. You see anything that calls itself by that name, you follow Rule 15, whether it knows your middle name or not. What does it look like? Different every time, but you'll know it by the way reality bends around it. And by what it offers. Offers? Everyone who's met it says the same thing. It offers them a way out, a release from duty, a chance to cross over and see their dead loved ones. Earl had paused at the door. Don't listen, don't accept, don't bargain. It's lying. He'd left, and I'd started my shift with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The first 3 hours had been quiet, too quiet, no customers at all, which according to my previous nights was unusual. I'd done my routine, Bay 3 dark tonight, air pressure check at 11:47 p.m., 36 psi, normal, lights off at 2:22 a.m. The voices had been louder tonight, more insistent, calling not just my name, but my grandfather's name too. At 3:15 a.m., the phone had rung. The landline in the office, which I hadn't even known was functional. I'd stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Route 77, pit stop. Static. Then, underneath it, a voice. Female. Distant. Sarah. Sarah. Honey, is that you? The voice had been achingly familiar. I hadn't heard it in 8 years, not since the funeral. Mom. Oh, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for so long. Sarah, honey, you need to get out of there. That place isn't safe. Your grandfather, he didn't want you there. Please, just leave. Get in your car and drive away. My mother had died in 2015. Pancreatic cancer. I'd been with her at the end, held her hand as she'd slipped away. This wasn't my mother. Who are you? I'd asked, my voice shaking. The static had increased. The voice had changed slightly, losing some of its warmth. I'm your mother, honey. Don't you recognize me? I'm worried about you. That place does things to people, changes them. I don't want you to end up like your grandfather, like Robert, like all of them. My mother is dead. Death isn't an ending, Sarah. It's a crossing. I'm on the other side of the road now, and I can see you. I can see what's coming for you on August 15th. Please, leave while you can. What's coming? The convergence. The blue moon brings them all together. Every spirit, every entity, everything that's been waiting on the road. They're going to try to break through, to tear down the barriers, and they're going to use you to do it. I'd grip the phone tighter. How? Your blood, your bloodline. You're the last one, Sarah, the last of the gatekeepers. If you die on the blue moon, the bargain breaks. The road opens completely, and everything that's been held back for the last 150 years will flood through. Then I won't die. The voice had laughed, and it had sounded nothing like my mother. That's what they all said. That's what Maria said. What your grandfather said. What Robert said. They all thought they could hold the line. They were all wrong. What do you want? I want to save you. I want you to leave, walk away, let the road reclaim what was always meant to be wild. Or, the voice had paused, or I can offer you another option. I'm listening. Cross over, join us. Your grandfather's here. Robert, all of them. We can be a family again, and you won't have to face what's coming. You'll be safe on this side. It had been tempting. God help me, it had been tempting. The thought of seeing my mother again, my grandfather, of being released from this responsibility I'd never asked for. But Earl's warning echoed in my mind. Don't listen, don't accept, don't bargain. No, I'd said. Sarah, you're not my mother, you're the traveler, and I'm not crossing over. The static had exploded into a shriek that had made me drop the phone. When I'd picked it up again, the line had been dead, but written in the condensation on the window, as if traced by a finger from outside, were words. 17 days. At 4 a.m., I'd heard meowing. The calico had returned, but she hadn't been alone. 3 other cats had been with her. A large orange tabby, a small black cat, and a grey tom that looked like he'd been in 100 fights. I'd fed all of them, and they'd arranged themselves around the property in a pattern that looked deliberate. North, south, east, west, like they were setting up a perimeter. The calico had sat by the door, and this time when she turned her head around to look at the desert, I'd followed her gaze. In the distance, barely visible, there had been lights, not headlights, not stars, something else. They'd been moving in patterns, swirling, dancing, like aurora borealis on the desert floor. The calico had hissed, and all 4 cats had started yowling, a sound that had raised every hair on my body. The lights had stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing had happened. Then they had begun to retreat, pulling back into the deeper desert. The cats had stopped yowling. The calico had looked up at me, blinked slowly, and then all 4 of them had disappeared into the darkness. At 5:30 a.m., I'd found another note tucked into the desk drawer. This one was in my grandfather's handwriting. I'd recognized it from birthday cards he'd sent me as a child. To whoever reads this, the blue moon is not just a celestial event, it's an amplifier. Every spirit within 100 miles is drawn here on those nights. Some are peaceful, just passing through. Some are trapped, desperate, and some are predators, waiting for a moment of weakness. The rules keep them in check. Follow them exactly, but know that rules alone won't be enough on the blue moon. You'll need allies. The cats are allies. The shadows in the dark bay are allies. Strange as that sounds, even some of the spirits can be allies if you've treated them with respect. There will be tests before the blue moon. The traveler will test your resolve. Other things will test your fear, your compassion, your judgment. Pass these tests. Prove you're worthy of the role. And remember, you're not holding the line alone. Every gatekeeper who came before you is still here, in the walls, in the foundations, in the very ground. We're part of the road now. We'll help when we can. But Sarah, if you're the one reading this, if you're my granddaughter, I'm so sorry. I tried to break the chain, tried to find another way, but bloodlines can't be escaped. The road chose us long ago. Stay strong, follow the rules, trust your instincts. And whatever you do, don't open the storage room door on the blue moon night. Grandpa James. I'd stared at that last line. Don't open the storage room door. But none of the rules said anything about opening it, just that it must be locked at sunset. What was in there? At 8 a.m., Earl had arrived and immediately noticed my face. You met the traveler. On the phone. It sounded like my mother. It always sounds like someone you've lost. Uses your grief against you. He'd studied me carefully. What did you tell it? No. Earl's shoulders had sagged with relief. Good. That's good. You passed another test. He'd poured coffee with shaking hands. 14 more days. My grandfather's note says not to open the storage room on the blue moon. What's in there? Earl had been quiet for a long moment. The reason this place exists, the center of the bargain, the thing that must be fed. Fed what? Pennies, old coins, payment from the spirits who pass through. Every 1965 penny, every silver dollar, every offering, it all goes in there eventually. And on the blue moon, we open it for exactly 1 hour. Let them take their payment. Let them claim what they're owed. And if we don't, they claim it by force. They take lives instead of pennies, blood instead of silver. Earl had met my eyes. That's how Maria died. She tried to keep them from the storage room, thought she could protect what was in there. They took her instead. What's in there, Earl? What are we protecting? The bones, he'd said quietly. The bones of everyone who's died on this road since 1850. Every spirit that passes through leaves their bones behind. It's the price of crossing. The storage room is full of them. Hundreds of skeletons, maybe thousands. And on the blue moon, the spirits come back to visit. Their bones. To remember what they were. To take strength from what they left behind. I'd felt sick. We're running a graveyard. We're running a way station for the dead. There's a difference. This isn't about death, Sarah. It's about transition. About helping spirits move from one state to another. Most of them are grateful. Most of them just want to cross peacefully. He gestured to the desert. But some don't. Some want to come back. Some want to drag the living across with them. That's what the rules prevent. And on August 15th, we opened the storage room at exactly midnight. We let them in. We let them visit their bones. And at exactly 1 a.m., we close and lock it again. For 1 hour, the barrier is completely down. Anything can happen. Everything will try. He'd pulled out a key, old, brass, with a symbol etched into it, the same symbol from the storage room door. Your grandfather gave me this before he died, said to give it to you when you were ready. Earl had placed it in my hand. On the blue moon, you'll need this. You'll be the one to open the door. And you'll be the one to close it, because you're the last of the bloodline, the only one they'll accept. The key had been warm in my palm, almost hot. I don't know if I can do this, I'd whispered. Your grandfather said the same thing. So did your great-uncle. So did I, once, a very long time ago. Earl had smiled sadly. But we all did it anyway, because someone has to, because the alternative is worse. What's the alternative? The road stays open, forever, and this whole stretch of desert becomes a graveyard for the living. I'd driven back to the trailer, clutching the brass key, and I'd slept fitfully through the afternoon. In my dreams, I'd walked through the storage room. The bones had been arranged in patterns, circles within circles, and in the center had been a door I hadn't noticed before. A door leading deeper, leading down. And from beneath that door, I'd heard voices, calling, waiting. 13 more days until the blue moon. 13 more nights to prepare for something I didn't understand. 13 more chances to run away, but I hadn't run. Even in the dream, I'd stayed. I'd stood at that door and I'd said, I'm not going anywhere. The voices had laughed, and the dream had ended. Night 4, I decided to be proactive. If I was going to survive the blue moon, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. So before my shift, I'd done something probably stupid. I'd walked the perimeter of the property in daylight, looking for anything unusual. The pit stop sat on about 2 acres of desert scrub. The main building, the garage, the trailer, the gas pumps. Behind the garage, I'd found something I'd missed before. A small cemetery. Not marked, not official. Just a plot of ground with stones arranged in rows. 17 stones, each carved with initials and dates. MR 1981, Maria's son, Tommy. MR 1987, Maria herself. DK 1993, TW 1993, JC 2001, my grandfather. SL 2004, PM 2008, KR 2015, RC 2024, Robert, my great uncle, and others, all dated on the 15th of various months, all blue moon deaths, but there had been one stone that didn't match the pattern. It sat apart from the others, older, the carving nearly worn away. EM 1850, Earl Morrison, or Earl, someone. The date was wrong though. 1850 would make him over 170 years old. I'd been staring at that stone when Earl's voice had come from behind me. Found the garden, I see. I'd jumped, spun around. He'd been standing there with a watering can, of all things. In the middle of the desert, he'd been about to water a plot of dead ground. Is this you? I'd pointed to the EM stone. Was me. Long time ago. He'd walked past me and begun sprinkling water on the graves, moving from stone to stone with practiced ease. 1850 was when I made the original bargain. I was a guide for wagon trains, helped people cross the desert, lost a whole party to thirst and heat and something else, something that hunted them in the night. I was the only survivor. And when I was dying, lying there in the sand, the road opened up for me. Something spoke, something old, said I could live, said I could help the others who died, but there was a price. What price? I had to stay, had to become the first gatekeeper, had to maintain the way station for as long as I was needed. He'd moved to Maria's Stone. That was 174 years ago, Sarah. I've been here ever since. Different bodies, same consciousness. When one wears out, I transition. Find a new host. Someone dying on the road. Someone willing to make the bargain. That's why you don't age. That's why I can't age. I'm not really human anymore. Haven't been for a very long time. He'd finished watering and turned to me. Your grandfather figured it out in his 3rd year. Took your great uncle 6 years. You figured it out in 4 days. You're sharp. That's good. You'll need to be. If you're immortal, why do you need me? Why can't you handle the blue moon alone? Because the bargain is weakening. The thing that spoke to me in 1850, the thing that created this way station, it's dying, or changing, or leaving. I don't know which, but every blue moon takes more out of me now. Last month, when Robert died, something happened. A part of me died with him. I felt it break, like a rope snapping. I can't hold the line alone anymore. The rules need a bloodline keeper now. Someone descended from the original families who traveled this road. And my family. Your family was with the wagon train I lost in 1850. 32 people. Men, women, children. Your great-great-great-grandmother was one of them. She was pregnant, died giving birth out there in the desert, but the baby survived. A boy. I saved him, raised him, kept the bloodline going. Every generation since has been connected to this place, even if they don't know it. I'd felt dizzy. So I was always meant to be here. You were always meant to have a choice. But yes, the road calls its own. He'd set down the watering can. Tonight you're going to meet some of the others, the ones who passed peacefully, the ones who want to help. They're not all monsters, Sarah. Some of them are just waiting. Waiting for what? To make sure the next generation of gatekeepers survives, because if the way station falls, they're trapped. Can't move forward, can't move back. They're invested in your survival. That night, Earl had stayed until 3 a.m. He'd said I needed to learn how to communicate with the peaceful spirits, how to distinguish them from the predators, how to ask for help when I needed it. At midnight, I'd clocked in and found the office rearranged. The desk had been moved to create an open space in the center of the room. Salt had been poured in a circle, and in the middle of the circle sat a folding chair. Sit, Earl had instructed. Stay inside the salt. It won't protect you from everything, but it'll keep out the minor annoyances. You're doing a séance in the gas station. I'm facilitating a staff meeting with our non-corporeal colleagues. He'd lit 3 candles, white, black, and red, and placed them around a circle. The spirits who want to help need to know you're willing to listen, need to see you're respectful. Tonight, we introduce you properly. I'd sat in the circle, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. Earl had begun speaking in a language I didn't recognize, something old, with sounds that didn't quite fit in a human mouth. The temperature had dropped. The candles had flickered despite the lack of wind. And they'd come. The first had been a woman in her 50s, wearing a dress from the 1950s. She'd appeared gradually, like a photograph developing, standing just outside the salt circle. Her edges had been fuzzy, indistinct, but her eyes had been sharp and aware. "You're James's granddaughter," she'd said. Her voice had sounded like it was coming from far away, filtered through water. "You have his eyes. Did you know him? I died here in 1956, tried to cross in July heat. Car broke down. James found me too late. But he stayed with me, held my hand, made sure I didn't cross alone. I've been here since, helping where I can." She'd smiled. "I'm Catherine. I watch the highway. When I see someone in trouble, really in trouble, I try to guide them here, to safety. Thank you. Thank James. He taught me there was purpose even in death." The second had been a young man, maybe 20, in clothes from the 1980s. He'd appeared standing, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. "Danny," he'd said shortly. "Motorcycle accident, 1989. Wasn't a blue moon, just bad luck and a patch of gravel. Your grandfather pulled me out of the wreck, but I was already gone. He buried me out back. I maintain the perimeter, keep the predators from getting too close before dark." "How?" "Noise, movement. I can make rocks move, create sounds that scare them off. They're strong, but they're cautious. Make them think there's something stronger protecting this place, and they circle instead of attack." A child had appeared next, a little girl maybe 8 years old, in clothes that looked like they were from the turn of the century, the 1900s. She'd stayed farther back, shy. "That's Emma," Earl had said softly. "Died in 1903. She doesn't speak much, but she watches the storage room. Makes sure nothing gets in or out between blue moons." Emma had waved at me with translucent fingers. More had come. 10 in total. All different eras, all different ages. All of them tied to the way station. All of them invested in keeping it running. The last to appear had been different from the others. Older, more solid. He'd stepped into the office like he still belonged there, and I'd recognized him immediately from photographs. Grandpa. James Chan had looked exactly as I'd remembered him. Tall, weathered, kind eyes, but there had been a weight to his presence that the others didn't have. An authority. "Sarah," he'd said, and his voice had been clear, present. "I'm so sorry. I tried to break this, tried to end it so you'd never have to carry it. Why didn't you tell Mom? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because I hoped." He'd moved closer to the circle, but hadn't crossed it. "I hoped that if I died on the blue moon, if I sacrificed myself properly, it would satisfy the bargain, would release the bloodline. But it didn't work. Just meant the road had to wait another generation. Wait for you. Robert tried too, Didn't he? He did. Last month. Thought if he went willingly, went peacefully, it would be enough. My grandfather had looked at Earl, but something's changed. The rules that used to be absolute are flexible now. The traveler is right about one thing. The bargain is ending, but not because the road is opening, because it's closing. Earl had stood abruptly. What? The thing that made you the first gatekeeper, Earl. It's leaving, moving on. The road of shadows is shifting. In another year, maybe two, it won't run through here anymore. It'll move. And when it does, this way station will be obsolete. All the spirits gathered here will need to cross at once, or be left behind, trapped in a place that's no longer liminal, just desert. The other spirits had stirred, agitated. Catherine had looked stricken. The blue moon, my grandfather had continued, is the last scheduled crossing before the shift. Maybe the last one ever from this location. Everything that's been waiting, everything that's been held back, is going to try to cross on August 15th. And if they break through improperly, if they force it, they'll tear reality apart. This whole stretch of desert will become a wound in the world, bleeding spirits and worse into the living realm. So what do? I'd asked. You hold a line for 1 hour, midnight to 1 a.m. You open the storage room at exactly midnight. You let them claim their bones. You let them gather their strength. And at exactly 1 a.m., you close and lock the door. The ones who've crossed properly will be on their way. The ones who haven't, he trailed off, will be trapped forever, will be consumed by the road itself, recycled, unmade. My grandfather had knelt by the circle, and I could see the pain in his eyes. Sarah, most of these spirits are peaceful. They just want to move on, but there are others, old ones, angry ones. The traveler is one of them. It's been walking this road since before humans had language. It doesn't want to cross, it wants to stay, and it needs a gatekeeper's body to anchor itself in the physical world. It wants to possess me. It wants to become you, to take your place. If it succeeds, the way station becomes its feeding ground. Everyone and everything that tries to cross gets consumed instead, becomes part of it. Earl had closed his eyes. That's what happened to Morrison. Morrison, I'd asked. My original body, the man I was born as. The traveler took him in 1852, 2 years after I made the bargain. Wore him like a suit. I had to kill my own body to stop it. Had to transfer to a new host. Earl had opened his eyes and they'd been wet. I've been running from it ever since. Every few decades, it catches up. Tries again. Takes someone I care about. Wears them, uses them to get close. Who did it take last month? I'd asked, though part of me already knew. Robert, Earl had whispered. It was wearing Robert when he died. That's why his death felt wrong. That's why something broke. The traveler consumed him from the inside, and when it was done, there was nothing left to bury. The spirits around us had grown more agitated. Danny had started pacing. Catherine had her hand over her mouth. Emma had disappeared entirely. My grandfather had reached toward me, his hand stopping at the salt line. Sarah, on the blue moon, the traveler is going to come for you. It's going to wear someone you trust, someone you love, and you're going to have to see through it, have to refuse it, have to fight it if necessary. How will I know it's the traveler? You'll know. Deep down, you'll feel it. Something wrong, something off. He'd stood. Trust your instincts, follow the rules, and remember, you're not alone. We'll all be there. All of us who've passed through properly. We'll help where we can. The candles had flickered and gone out. When I'd blinked, the spirits had been gone. Only Earl remained, looking older than ever. That went well, he'd said dryly. My great-uncle is dead because the traveler possessed him. Yes, and it's going to try to possess me in 13 days. Yes, and you knew this when you hired me. Earl had been quiet for a long moment. Yes. I'd stood up, stepped out of the salt circle. You used me as bait. I used you as the only hope we have left. Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry, but you're the last of the bloodline, the only one the road will accept. If you're not here on August 15, every spirit gathered here, the good ones, the bad ones, all of them, will be trapped and consumed when the road shifts, and the traveler will be free to find another way station, another crossing point, to start this all over again, somewhere else. Why should I care about spirits that are already dead? Because some of them are children, because some of them are good people who died badly, because your grandfather is one of them, and your great-uncle, and everyone who's ever tried to help maintain this place. Earl had met my eyes. And because if the traveler gets free, it won't stop with the dead. It'll start feeding on the living, every traveler on Route 77, every person who stops for gas, every family passing through. I'd wanted to hit him, wanted to run, wanted to scream. Instead, I'd said, "What do I need to do to prepare?" Earl's shoulders had sagged with relief. Learn the territory, meet the entities, good and bad, understand their patterns, and practice using this. He'd pulled out something from his jacket, a knife, old, the blade made of what looked like obsidian, the handle wrapped in leather and decorated with symbols. Obsidian can cut spiritual flesh, can harm things that can't be hurt by normal weapons. Your grandfather used it twice on blue moons, once to save Maria's son, once to, he'd stopped, once to kill his own body when the traveler took him. I'd finished. That's how he died, isn't it? Not peacefully. He had to end himself to stop it. He transferred his consciousness to the road first, became part of the way station itself. He didn't die. He transcended. Earl had held out the knife. But yes, he cut his own throat to stop the traveler from using his body. I'd taken the knife. It was surprisingly light, perfectly balanced. The blade seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I don't know how to fight. You don't need to be an expert. You need to be willing. The traveler is strong, but it's arrogant. It doesn't expect real resistance. Surprise will be your advantage. The rest of the night had been quiet. Too quiet. I checked the air pressure at 11:47. 38 psi, high end of normal. I turned off the open sign at 2:22. Nothing had tapped on the windows this time, but I'd heard footsteps circling the building. I'd fed the cats when they'd appeared at 4 a.m., 5 of them tonight, including one I hadn't seen before, a massive Maine Coon that had to weigh 25 pounds. At 6 a.m., just before Earl's arrival, I'd found another note tucked into the register. This one was in handwriting I didn't recognize, shaky, rushed. To the new gatekeeper. My name was Robert Chen. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. The traveler came for me 3 days ago. I felt it the moment it touched me, like ice in my veins. It's been speaking to me ever since, wearing me down, making promises. It says it can give me back everyone I've lost, says it can make me whole, but I know what it really wants. It wants a door, a body, a way to stay. I'm going to fight it, going to try to resist until the blue moon. Maybe I can hold out. Maybe I can warn whoever comes next. But if I can't, if I'm gone, you need to know, the traveler can be killed. It's old, but it's not invincible. It has a true form, a core. You'll see it if you can force it to manifest completely. And if you can cut that core with the obsidian blade, you can end it. Not just drive it off, end it permanently. Your grandfather almost managed it in 2001, got close enough to wound it. That's why it's been cautious since then, why it's been using proxies and possession instead of manifesting directly. But on the blue moon, when the barriers are down, it'll have to manifest to claim a body. That's your chance. That's when it's vulnerable. Don't hesitate. Don't listen to its lies. Don't let it wear the faces of the people you love. And whatever you do, don't let it touch you before you're ready to fight. Its touch is how it gets in. Good luck. The bloodline depends on you. The road depends on you. We all do.